My name is Christian Riker, and I'm the assistant manager in the garden at White Oak Pastures. Organic gardening is closer to what our food system should look like. Soil health is important in all aspects of agriculture and just all aspects of really everything. The soil's health directly correlates with our own health, and it first really starts in the soil with the microorganisms. The microorganisms also interacting with the mechanical nature of the ground, whether the ground's compacted or maybe it's loose. And then when you start to get into maybe you have really good soil and those microorganisms are able to form relationships with the mycelium in the ground or with the root systems of the plants, then that leads to just a healthier system overall, a more robust system that is going to sustain life longer and keep life healthier, and therefore have more nutrient-dense foods that ultimately affect the plants and then affect animals and ourselves. I'd say some of the biggest challenges that we face in springtime is the grass is really starting to grow this time of year. So just trying to get on top of that and get a jump on seed heads. So we're just going to start off by seeding out some marigold. We save these seed, and this is some zinnia seed that we also save. I find that a lot of times, at least in the organic gardening, it seems like people really don't save seeds nowadays. It seems like such a lost art to saving seed. Depending on what seed, like if it's a tomato seed, you might need to let it rot down or something like that. From what I understand, like the Amish have a good way of saving tomato seed. They'll just slice up a tomato and set it in some moist soil, and they set it under their house or in a dark, moist spot. And they do this about a fall time from one of their tomato plants that's just put on. And come springtime, they just pull it out, water it a little bit, and they'll come up. For a pepper, for example, you could just get the pepper right off the plant the seed, and come up. For a tomato, it has to, rot, and it has to ferment in order to break down a certain coating on the outside of the seed to allow it to germinate. A lot of flower seeds, I think, are the same way, where you can just plant them like a pepper and it'll grow straight away. And saving them isn't much harder. You just pluck them off and dry them out, and then you never have to buy seeds again. It gets very warm here, it gets very humid here, and so the sooner that we can get our plants in the ground in order to develop a really good root system, the more they're going to be protected against weather fluctuations and heats and things such as that. So just really trying to time things properly and prepare for the summer coming is what I'd say where our biggest challenges lie right in the springtime. All these little white flowers that you see, these are all radishes going to seed, trying to get pollinated. We've got a bunch of different types of ryegrass that are mixed in here. A lot of different types of clover again, clover is the legume. That's one of the things that is going to fix nitrogen. And part of its function in fixing nitrogen is the habitat it creates for a specific bacteria in the soil. We're not really growing the clover specifically for its ability to penetrate into the ground, but more so for its ability to fix nitrogen for us, to pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and to put it into the ground. The ryegrasses and the different grasses that we plant, one of the benefits, again, similar to the radishes, is that grasses are really known for their deep root system. So the ultimate goal here is just to really make the soil healthy, and that's again why we use this cover crop. Flower seeds really don't need to be planted too deep. But kind of think of the function of a flower. It just comes up, grows, dies, and then dries up. And a lot of these seeds are just going to be scattered more closer to the surface, as opposed to maybe you could think of maybe like a peach or something like that that really wants to get eaten, so it gets eaten and then maybe something poops out the pit somewhere else, and now it's kind of covered in a little bit more soil. So just depending on the plant, the seeding function is going to be a little different. A tomato naturally would just fall to the ground and rot, ferment, and then grow the next year. I wasn't always into gardening, you could say, but I remember one of the earliest things I said was, I'm going to be a preaching farmer. And whenever I'd see a tractor on the side of the road, I'd say, that's my tractor, they're just borrowing it. I was really little and just used to seeing monoculture. Big fields of peanuts, big fields of cotton and corn. And my family, we had sometimes a little small vegetable garden. I had chickens, I had ducks, but I never saw myself really being into gardening. When I was about 12 years old, I started doing community theater. And so I just built these relationships with these people, and so really they became my family. And after I graduated high school, I decided I want to pursue theater and performance studies. But it really took until I got to school to figure out that it really wasn't the acting or the performance that I enjoyed. It was really the community that I enjoyed. And it really made me rethink what I was doing with my life. Around this same time, COVID happened and a lot of my classes got moved online. And I was feeling like maybe this college thing isn't right for me. Maybe I should take a little bit of time off and kind of figure out what I'm doing. Then I just fell down this rabbit hole of soil science. And there was this farm I found, it was called Ridgedale Permaculture. And this farm in Sweden, growing up where I was so used to monoculture, and I was so used to huge fields, hundreds, if not thousands of acres of just the same thing. And this is kind of what I thought agriculture was. But until I found permaculture in Ridgedale and Sweden, I didn't really understand what farming could be. The mixing of landscaping, the mixing of vegetable farming, and especially permaculture and polyculture. I started to learn about all these different things that I didn't know about. Monoculture was just how agriculture was in my mind. And unfortunately, really in these last, few decades, all this stuff has been lost. Healing the soil turns into nutrient density in food. And so I kind of really fell down this rabbit hole and said, this is what I have to do. Coming out of wintertime, going into springtime, the sun's not really as intense as it will be in a few months here. And so we don't really have to worry about the ground drying out as much. Maybe the mulches and stuff aren't as big a deal as they will be in the summertime. The summertime, we really will need more mulches, or we'll need a better program for watering. We just seeded out a tray of marigold here, and we're gonna plant these. Hopefully, they're good to have anywhere, right? Flowers are really good just for the ecosystem in general. But the reason specifically that I'm seeding marigold is because we're seeding tomatoes also right now. We're getting ready for planting out our really spring and summer crops. So what marigold does is it smells bad to the nematode, right? And so they don't want to be around it. And so this gets into the whole concept of companion planting. And companion planting is where I think that we should more so be looking to companion plant as opposed to looking to monoculture. That's gonna make fungal diseases or parasite diseases or things that are gonna harm that specific plant. It's gonna make them multiply more and more because they can just keep breeding and spreading out. As opposed if you had a more diverse or a polyculture instead of a monoculture. For someone who wants to transition to organic gardening, if you're starting out with, let's say, a flower bed at home, maybe the thing you do is instead of buying that commercial chemical fertilizer, maybe you buy a bag of manure. Maybe if you're on some type of big row crop farm, maybe you start with setting aside 2-3 acres and trying to figure out how you can organically farm that. And once you figure out a system with that, trying to expand that further down the line. It really depends on what your current setup and system looks like and the availability of your resources, how to transition.